Hello, and welcome back to another Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profile video. Today, I am going to be taking a look at one of the most fun decks that I have ever built, or at least in my opinion anyway. Now, I always try to make my decks fun to play, but this one really epitomizes the way that I construct decks, I think. This is my Adamancipator Magnet deck. It's all about rock monsters and synchro summoning, and just filling the field with all sorts of crazy stuff, and most importantly, digging. Doing so much digging through your deck until you find the cards that you need, and it's so much fun to do, and I hope that you'll see why as I go through this entire deck shortly. Now, this will follow the same format that I always do for my deck profiles. I will go over every card in this deck in excruciating detail, and then I will go over the extra deck and give a few honorable mentions before doing a quick demo of how you might want to play some of the things in this deck. So, let's get right down to it. First up, let's take a look at the Adamancipators themselves. These are all rock tuner monsters that have sort of similar effects. Many of them, actually all of them, special summon themselves in some way. So the Adamancipator Researcher is the easiest one to use. It is at level 2. It is a tuner. If you control a rock monster, except this one, you can special summon this card from your hand, which is something very easy to do, and it allows you to get the ball rolling. So during the main phase, you excavate the top 5 cards of your deck, and then you can special summon an excavated level 4 or lower non-tuner rock monster and put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So this is where the digging begins. You play your Adamancipator card, you look at the top 5 cards of your deck, and then you play a small, level 4 or lower non-tuner rock monster from among them, and then you can do whatever it says on that card. Sometimes you whiff entirely and you don't get anything. It happens, but that is all of the fun of this deck. Being able to fail is... it is a feature, really, not a bug, because that's just what makes it fun. And we've got 3 of these Adamancipator Researchers because they are really good. We also have the Adamancipator Seeker, which is another level 2 tuner. It has the same excavating effect that the previous one had, except this one's a little harder to play because you need an Adamancipator monster in play to special summon this. So not just any rock monster will do, it needs to be an Adamancipator monster. So you might find yourself normal summoning this one instead. But still, that excavation ability is very, very useful, and again, it's what drives this deck forward. So we have 3 of these Adamancipator Seekers, because while they aren't quite as good as the Researcher, they're still really, really good. And finally, I have 1 copy of the Adamancipator Analyzer. This is a level 4 tuner, so it's a bit bigger, which does have its pros and cons in this deck. It is useful to have a level 4 sometimes, but this one requires your opponent to control a monster in order to special summon this one. And if you're going first, which this deck probably wants to do, it can go second, with some reasonable amount of success, but it would rather go first, I think, so this one might not be special summoned that often. But again, it has the same excavating, digging effect that the other ones had. It digs down 5 cards and you special summon something, so it is still worth having at least the 1 copy of, because it goes with something else a little bit later. Now, the Adamancipators are cool and all, but they aren't gonna win the game on their own. What are they digging for? Well, the answer is right here. These are the magnets, the Magnet Warriors. Starting out with Alpha, the Electromagnet Warrior, that is. Level 3 rock monster. It is not a tuner, which means that all of your Adamancipators can special summon this thing if they find it. Now, the Electromagnet Warrior cards are a little bit complicated, but maybe I can explain what they do. So, first of all, they all do something when they are normal or special summoned. That is great. This one, Alpha, will add a level 8 Magna Warrior from your deck to your hand. That is what you're eventually going to be working towards. Now, all of the Electromagnet Warriors have the following effect. So during your opponent's turn, you can tribute this card to special summon a level 4 Magnet Warrior from your deck as a quick effect. So, if this thing is in play, you tribute it, you can special summon a level 4, specifically, Magnet Warrior, which will then do other things, and if you've got a couple of these Electromagnet Warriors in play, they can all do this, and you can fill up your graveyard with Electromagnets and fill your field with other Magnet Warriors, and things get a little bit chaotic sometimes. But yes, that is what they all do. Next up, we have Beta, the Electromagnet Warrior. This one, again, level 3. It's a little bit weaker with 1500 attack instead of 1700, but you're usually not using these fellows for attacking. So when this one is normal or special summoned, you add a level 4 lore Magnet Warrior from your deck to your hand, except Beta. So this will get you any other Magnet Warrior that you might need. And again, it does the whole tributing special summoning thing. I run Beta at 2. You could get away with running this at 1, but I think if any of them deserves to be run in double, it is this one, because it just gets whatever you want. Any piece that you don't have, this one will fetch for you. And then we have Gamma, the Electromagnet Warrior, with 2000 defense, if it is ever relevant. But when this one is normal or special summoned, you can special summon a level 4 lore Magnet Warrior from your hand, except for Gamma. And once more, it does the whole special summoning thing on the opponent's turn. But if you happen to have another magnet in your hand, well, then you can play this thing and you get a free special summon out of the deal, which is always nice to have. And now we get into the level 4 Magnet Warriors. These ones are not electromagnets, these are mere magnets. But Delta here, this is kind of a starter in this deck. This deck doesn't really have true starters in it, and I think I will explain why as we go. But this one is sort of halfway there, so if it is normal or special summoned, again, if it's special summoned off of an Adamancipator, it will still get its effect. Then you can send a level 4 lore Magnet Warrior, which includes Electromagnet Warriors, from your deck to the graveyard. And if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can banish a bunch of Magnet Warriors from your graveyard to special summon Valkyrion the Magna Warrior, who I am not using in this deck, so that part of the effect is not relevant. But being able to just pitch something into your graveyard is a very powerful ability in this deck. Mostly because it works so wonderfully with Epsilon the Magnet Warrior. Now, I only ran a single copy of Delta, because Delta is kind of just Epsilon, but worse. So I have 3 copies of Epsilon, though. So if Delta was like half a starter, Epsilon is, it's a good 2/3 of the way there, anyway. So level 4, again, it's another rock. When it is normal or special summoned, you send a level 4 lore Magnet Warrior from your deck to the graveyard, as a cost, I might add. This is not the effect itself. I think this is actually the cost when it is special summoned. And then this card's name becomes that monster's name until the end phase, which doesn't often matter. but you can then special summon a Magnet Warrior or Magna Warrior from your graveyard with a different name than the cards you control. So that is a long, complicated effect. How it works: you play Epsilon, you send one of your magnets to the graveyard from your deck, and then its name will become that card's name, and then you can special summon a different Magnet Warrior from your graveyard. So if you've got something in there, like, for example, if you had already used Delta to send something there, then you get to special summon more stuff for free and then use all of this stuff as material for whatever. And yes, we've got 3 Epsilons because Epsilon's very important. And all of this builds up to Berserkion, the Electro-Magna Warrior, which is the big finisher in this deck, or one of them anyway, with 3,000 attack. And it has very, very tiny text, because there's a lot of stuff going on here. Can't be normal summoned or set, you have to special summon it from your hand by banishing an Alpha, the Electromagnet Warrior, a Beta, and a Gamma, all from your hand, graveyard, and or face up on your field. And then what you do when this thing is in play is you can banish a level 4 lore Magnet Warrior from your graveyard, target one card your opponent controls, and destroy it. This is not once per turn. So as long as you have fuel in your graveyard, again, we're seeing how important the graveyard is, as long as you've got stuff in there, you can keep on destroying your opponent's cards. A very useful ability. And if this card is destroyed by battle, or if this card in its owner's possession is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, target one each of your Alpha, Beta, and Gamma and special summon all of them. So it also sort of recycles itself. It's a good and efficient card, and we will see a lot about how we might want to use this later. Now, to help this deck along, we have a handful of other miscellaneous rocks with effects that you might want to special summon off of your Adamancipators, or just play from your hand if you have them. Doki Doki is a level 2 with a 500 attack and defense. So what you do with this card, though, is you discard a rock monster to special summon from your deck one rock monster with the same original attribute and level as the monster you discarded in either face-up attack or face-down defense position. So this is why it's important to have that level 4 Adamancipator, because you can discard one of the magnets to get it, or you can discard it to get one of the magnets, or you can use this to special summon any of the level 3 magnets, or discard a level 2 to get your level 2 Adamancipators. It really gets anything, depending on what's already in your hand. So I've got 2 of these because they're good to have. We also have whatever this is, the, that is a name on this one. Carthorin, the Hidden Gem of the Seafront. Yeah, there is a small subset of water monsters in this deck. Most of them are earth, but a handful of them are water, and this is the reason why. Because again, this card has a lot of effects. It's level 2, by the way. So you can discard this card, and then you can normal summon an earth or water monster during your main phase in addition to your normal summon. So it does help you play some extra cards. But if you control an earth and water monster while this card is in the graveyard, you can special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. So again, it just lets you continue your plays and keep on special summoning your extra deck monsters. I've got 2 of them. I run a lot of this stuff at 2, mostly because of Doki Doki. It doesn't really help to have only 1 of these when you could discard it to special summon the other one. But yes, we're running Carthorin here at 2. And I know I just said that I run all this stuff at 2, but I'm only using a single Adamancipator Crystal Dragite, because this is, I don't know, I guess it's sort of the mini-game of this deck. It is a level 4 water monster, but if it is special summoned by the effect of an Adamancipator card, then you can draw a card. So it's usually a good idea to special summon this if you find it. but it's not particularly useful in your hand, which is why I really don't think you want to be running too many of these things. But if this card is in your graveyard, you can target a Water Synchro you control or in your graveyard, return it to the extra deck, and then place this card on top of your deck. So you can sort of set up an Adamancipator dig with this thing, just so that you're guaranteed to get it, and then draw another card, and you get your Water Synchros back from your graveyard, which there are a couple of really good ones that we will once again talk about later whenever I get there. And now let's look at some hand traps. So I've got this Nibiru, the primal being here. In fact, I run two of them, because this is a rock hand trap. Which means if you need a 3000 attack beater, you could actually play this off of Doki Doki if you have one in your hand. But typically what you do with this card is during the main phase, if your opponent has normal or special summoned 5 or more monsters this turn, then as a quick effect you can tribute as many face-up monsters on the field as possible, and then special summon this card from your hand and special summon a primal being token to your opponent's field, whose attack and defense are the combined sum of all of the monsters that you tributed to play this. So it is a board wipe at quick effect speed from your hand, provided your opponent has been going crazy summoning monsters. But as useful as that is, again, it's kind of funny that you can just use this as a rock for various other effects, so that's why I have two of them. It is nice to have, even if this deck would rather go first. Sometimes you have to go second, and then you're very thankful you have this Nibiru. And, of course, we have our 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, because this is a good catch-all card for all sorts of occasions. You can discard it when your opponent activates an effect that adds a card from the deck to the hand, special summons from the deck, or sends a card from the deck to the graveyard, and then you negate that effect. You don't want any of that stuff happening, you see, so Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring is usually good to have in any given game. So, that does it for the monsters. Now let's take a look at some magnet-related spell cards, starting with the Magnetic Field, which is, of course, the field spell. Now what it does is, if you control a level 4 or lower Earth Rock monster, so it doesn't even have to be a magnet, it could be one of your Adamancipators, I suppose, then you can target a level 4 or lower Magnet Warrior in your graveyard and special summon it. So we're seeing once again how important it is to have a well-stocked graveyard, because we can constantly recycle those resources throughout the turn, depending on what cards you have in play. And also, once per turn, at the end of the damage step, when an Earth Rock monster you control battled an opponent's monster, but that opponent's monster was not destroyed, then you can return that opponent's monster to the hand. So sometimes people don't read all the way to the bottom of this card, and then they end up bouncing their own big scary monsters back to their hand, or you can just ram one of your Magnet Warriors into something of theirs that you can't get rid of, and then this might just do the job for you. So we're running 2 copies of Magnetic Field because it's useful to have, but not necessary for the functioning of the deck. Still, you're usually happy to see it. And then we've got 3 copies of Magnet Induction, because this is, this is the second half or third of your starter combo sometimes. So what it does is, if you control a Magnet Warrior monster whose original level is 4 or lower, then you can special summon a level 4 or lower Magnet Warrior from your deck with a different name than the cards you control. And for the rest of the turn after this card resolves, Magnet Warriors and Magna Warriors cannot be destroyed by battle or your opponent's card effects. Well, that usually doesn't come into play during your own turn, but still, being able to search your deck for any other magnet and put it right into play is extremely useful. because again, they all have effects that activate when they are played, so this will get whatever you're missing from whatever combo you're trying to cook up. And that is why we run this at 3, because it is typically always a great card to have in hand. Now, to finish off with my spell cards here, we have just a collection of sort of staple removal effects, starting with the Triple Tactics talent here, which does a lot of stuff. If your opponent has activated a monster effect during your main phase this turn, perhaps they hand-trapped you, then you can activate one of these effects. You either draw 2 cards, take control of a monster your opponent controls until the end phase, or look at your opponent's hand, choose 1 card, and shuffle it into the deck. So that last effect there is particularly nasty if you're going first. Otherwise, I will say I've definitely won games that I would have otherwise lost, simply due to that second effect of stealing one of your opponent's monsters. So yeah, this is a great card to use. I only use one of it though, because really, in my experience, that's all I've ever needed. Like, you either have it or you don't, right? So if you've got it, use it. Otherwise, there's plenty of other stuff that you can do instead. We also have a Called by the Grave here, which, again, I'm running at 1 because it is limited to 1. You target a monster in your opponent's graveyard, banish it. If you do until the end of the next turn, that is important, its effects are negated as well as the activated effects, and effects on the field of monsters with that same original name. So, to explain in simple terms what this does, if your opponent hand traps you, you can use Called by the Grave to banish that monster from the graveyard and negate its effects. But there are advanced applications to this card as well, if you, like, set it, and then on your opponent's turn you can mess with their graveyard to negate other effects. It is a very, very powerful card, and I guess that's why it's limited. We also have Lightning Storm here, which I am running at 2, because even though this deck wants to go first, sometimes that doesn't happen. So then you're very happy to have a Lightning Storm. If you control no face-up cards, because maybe you're going second, you activate one of these effects. You destroy all attack position monsters your opponent controls, or destroy all of their spells and traps. So, in my experience, destroying spells and traps is almost always what you want to do. Like, unless they don't have any, of course. An opponent with a loaded back row of face-down cards is terrifying, so it's very good to just get rid of those things, and Lightning Storm does a great job. We also have Cosmic Cyclone here, which I am running at 2, for that very same reason. Pay 1,000 life points, target a spell or trap on the field, and banish it. This is a quick play spell. So, yeah, if you're going first, you can set this. Otherwise, you can use it to get rid of a problematic card on your opponent's field. I like having these, just as the spare couple of removal cards, but if you want to replace them with something else, then by all means do so. I just think that they're good. And to finish off the main deck, we have my trap cards, or trap card singular, that I run at 3. This is Infinite Impermanence, which is a very, very good trap card, and I use it in almost every deck because there's no reason not to. So you target a face-up monster your opponent controls, negate its effects till the end of the turn, then if this card was set before activation and is still on the field at resolution, then for the rest of the turn all other spells and traps in this card's column are negated. But if you control no cards, maybe you're going second and, you have nothing in play yet, and it's your opponent's turn, then you can activate this card from your hand. So yeah, this is an extremely, extremely powerful trap card. Just negate your opponent's effects, because you don't want any of that happening. And that is why I run it at 3. It's always, maybe not always, but 99% of the time, it is a great boon to have one of these in your opening hand. Now, let's move on to the extra deck. Starting with the Synchros. So all of those Adamancipators are tuners, which means we have a healthy amount of Synchros in this deck. Starting with the Herald of the Arc Light. Now, this is not a ritual deck, as you have seen, so the ability of this card when it is sent to the graveyard to add ritual monsters or spells to your hand is completely irrelevant. But it is a level 4 Synchro, which can be, it can mean something if you have literally nothing else to do. So, what it does is a monster sent from the hand or main deck to the graveyard is banished instead, which can throw a wrench into your opponent's plans. It might also throw a wrench into your own plans, so don't play this until after you're done with anything else. But the important thing here is, when a spell or trap or monster effect is activated, you can tribute to this card and negate that activation and destroy that card. So it is just one sort of catch-all omni-negation effect that you can have in play, provided you have the proper materials for it. It's not something that I will often use, because I don't like my own things being banished, but again, sometimes you just don't dig up the right cards, and then you're stuck with something weird, and then you're happy to have the option to play the Herald of the Arc Light. Now, a card that you're always going to want to play, and I do mean it this time, always, is the Naturia Beast. It is a level 5. While this card is face up on the field, send the top 2 cards of your deck to the graveyard to negate the activation of a spell card and destroy it. So, you would be surprised, or maybe not, but I am surprised how many decks will straight up fold to a Naturia Beast. You play this card and then they can't do anything because everything is so reliant on busted spell cards. You play Naturia Beast, they try to play something, and you send the top 2 cards of your deck to the graveyard, and then you just negate that activation. This is not once per turn. Your opponent tries to activate a second spell card because their hand is nothing but spells, because that's how they make the game now. Well, then you just negate the second one, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth. Naturia Beast is a very powerful card. If you can go into any card in your extra deck, this is the one you want to try for. We do have a handful of Adamancipators in the extra deck as well, 2 of them in fact, and this is the Adamancipator Risen Raptite. It is a level 6, so what it does, let's see if we can get this into focus, is during the main phase, excavate the top 5 cards of your deck, and then special summon a rock monster in defense position from among them, place the rest at the bottom. It does something else with wind monsters in your graveyard, but that's not happening in this deck. So the important thing is here that it gives you one more chance to dig for something, because sometimes you just gotta keep digging. And also, this one is a little bit different in that it can hit tuners. So if you haven't used all of the other Adamancipators once this turn, well, maybe this one will hit the one that you haven't already used, and then you can just continue digging and continue doing other things. Naturia Barkion here is, it's similar to the Naturia Beast, except this one works with trap cards. During either player's turn, when a trap card is activated, banish 2 cards from your graveyard, negate the activation, destroy it. This card must be face up on the field to activate and use this effect. So this one's level 6, by the way. So while the Naturia Beast is great sort of offensively, Barkion is great defensively because you don't want your opponents to be using their trap cards. And sometimes playing this is the best defense you have against your opponent using an evenly matched or something and ruining your day. And here's another water monster, again, a small collection of them in this deck. It is a level 6 Coral Dragon. So once per turn, discard a card, target one card your opponent controls and destroy it. If this Synchro summoned card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can draw a card. So it is also a tuner, I might add. It is a Synchro and a tuner. So this is sort of a midway point as you climb through the Synchro ladder. You can use it to destroy something if you want, that's useful to have there, but mostly it's here just so that you can draw that additional card as you go into the bigger Synchros, like Adamancipator Risen Dragite, which is a level 8 with 3000 attack. This is a big one, and it also has a very long effect. So during your main phase, excavate the top 5 cards of your deck, but this one doesn't special summon anything. You can instead return cards your opponent controls to the hand up to the number of excavated rock monsters, and then you put them all at the bottom of your deck in any order. So this is practically a one-sided board wipe in your favor, if you can get it into play, which is awesome, but it does more as well. When your opponent activates a spell or trap card, or effect, while a water monster is in your graveyard, quick effect, you can negate that activation and then destroy that card. So this right here is the whole reason why I have that little water sub-theme, because if you can get this out on your first turn, with or without Naturia Beast there as well, it's just another negation for a spell or trap effect, which is, again, great to have, especially on a 3000 attack body. And finally, to finish off all these water monsters, is the Ravenous Croco Dragon Archethys. It is a fish Synchro effect. 1000 attack and defense doesn't look like much, but it gains 500 of each for each card in your hand. And you can only use each of the following effects once per turn. So if this card is Synchro summoned, you can draw cards equal to the number of non-tuners used for its Synchro summon. So if you summon this off of your Coral Dragon, plus another non-tuner, then you are drawing 2 additional cards right there, which is very, very good. And as a quick effect, you can discard 2 cards, I guess the 2 you just drew maybe, and then target 1 card on the field and destroy it. So it's nice to have that extra destruction effect there as well. This is level 9, by the way, so level 9 is a bit of a weird number. You might not always be able to hit it, but if you can, there are level 3s in the deck, right? All those magnets are level 3s. If you can, this is another very good alternative card to be going into. Now, let's take a look at the XYZ monsters. There are 2 of them, they are both rocks. Let's start out with number 106, the Giant Hand. It is a rank 4, so it requires 2 level 4 monsters, of course, during either player's turn. When a monster effect is activated on your opponent's field, except during the damage step, you can detach 2 XYZ materials from this card, then target 1 effect monster your opponent controls, and while this card is face up on the field, that effect monster's effects are negated, and it can't change its battle position, as a 2000 attack, 2000 defense. So, this one is sort of like the Herald of the Arclight, in that I don't often go into it. It's sort of a last resort. If I have literally nothing better to do, this is something that I will try to make, because it's better than nothing, right? It does negate 1 effect at least, and sometimes you're thankful to have that much. More often, I will go into the Gallant Granite, which is another rank 4, so you see they sort of compete for the same place. But what this one does is you detach a material to either add a rock monster from your deck to your hand, or special summon a rock monster from your hand in face-down defense position. So usually I'm not special summoning anything, a face-down defense position doesn't help me much, but using this to just get any rock monster from my deck to my hand, that is incredible, and that enables me usually to continue plays or to just start the ball rolling, depending on what I had ahead of time. Finally, to finish off the extra deck, we have the Link monsters, starting with IP Masquerena, which is just a generally good catch-all Link monster for any occasion. So it needs 2 non-link monsters to play, and during your opponent's main phase, as a quick effect, you can link summon a link monster using materials you control, including this card. And a link monster that used this card as material can't be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, which is kind of cool. But mostly, you're using this to try to surprise your opponent with some destruction effects that are also in these link monsters, and that's a cool thing that you can do at quick effect speed. We also have Mrs. Radiant here, which is another Link 2 that requires Earth monsters. What it does is all Earth monsters on the field gain 500 attack and defense, and all Wind monsters lose 400 attack and defense. So this is a great way to give a general pump to your entire board, including itself, so it's usually bigger than this. And then you can get over big monsters your opponent might have, or go for that OTK. And as an added bonus, if this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can target an Earth monster in your graveyard and add it to your hand, so it's always nice to get that stuff back. Here we have SP Little Knight, which is a new addition to this deck, because they banned Appaloosa, because I guess they just don't want me to have nice things. So now I'm using SP Little Knight instead. It requires 2 effect monsters. If it is link summoned using a fusion, synchro, XYZ, or link monster as material, you can target a card on the field or in either graveyard and banish it. But then your monsters can't attack directly this turn, but that doesn't matter if you play this off of IP Masquerena on your opponent's turn. And when your opponent activates a card or effect as a quick effect, you can target 2 face-up monsters on the field, including a monster you control, and banish both of them until the end phase. Only use each effect once per turn. So that is a thing that you can do offensively, of course, to get rid of something of your opponent's temporarily, but you can also use it defensively to bounce something of your own if it gets targeted by removal or something. So that's another nifty way that you can use this card. But yes, it is very, very powerful. It does a lot of things. And here we have Nightmare Phoenix, which needs 2 monsters with different names. If it is link summoned, you can discard a card, target a spell or trap your opponent controls, and destroy it. Then if this card was co-linked when this effect was activated, you can draw a card. That doesn't typically happen. This is mostly just there because it's an easy way to get a bit more back row removal, because again, an opponent with a lot of back row stuff set is rather frightening. And here we have Nightmare Unicorn, which is a Link 3. It needs 2+ monsters with different names. But if this card is link summoned, discard a card, target 1 card on the field, and shuffle it into the deck. Then if it was co-linked, you can draw a card. So yeah, that typically, again, is not something that this deck will be doing. You don't play that many link monsters that the co-linking effects are all that relevant, but it's another way to get rid of something that is maybe more difficult to remove, and if you can play this off of IP Masquerena, then again, it's something cool you can use to disrupt your opponent on their turn. And finally, we have the Underworld Goddess of the Closed World, which is a massive Link 5. It needs 4+ effect monsters. But the important thing about this card is that you can also use 1 monster your opponent controls as material to link summon this card. And if it is link summoned, you can negate the effects of all face-up monsters your opponent currently controls, and this link summoned card is unaffected by your opponent's activated effects unless they target this card, and once per turn when your opponent activates a card or effect that special summons from the graveyard, then you can negate that activation. So this is, once again, something cool you can do with IP Masquerena, in that if you have 4 monsters in play and your opponent plays 1, you can link summon this on your opponent's turn and just gobble up whatever they just played. Which is cool. It is a cruel thing to do, mind you, but it is kind of cool, and then you get a 3000 attack monster out of the deal. And this brings me to what I like to call the honorable mentions. And we are going to start by addressing the elephant in the room, Valkyrion the Magna Warrior. So, this is a card that usually needs the old Magnet Warriors, which I'm not using, but you can play it pretty easily off of Delta. The thing is, Valkyrion is just a giant beater, and it doesn't really do anything. And typically, if you have the choice between playing Valkyrion and playing Berserkion, the Electro-Magna Warrior, you're going to go for the Berserkion, who has destruction effects and does other things. It is possible to play them both. It is technically possible. But it is very, very difficult, and usually circumstances do not allow for that, which is why, unfortunately, I am not using Valkyrion. But if you really, really want to, then you can do it, and maybe that 3500 attack will come in handy where simply destroying something would not. I would also be remiss if I did not at least mention that in an original draft of this deck, I used the fossil monsters as well as the magnets. So the fossil monsters are a fusion archetype. They use the fusion deck quite a bit and move cards in and out of the graveyard and do all sorts of stuff, and they like eat your opponent's monsters from the graveyard to special summon their biggest fusions. But I found that as I tested the deck on Master Duel, I always do my testing on Master Duel, I just never wanted to play the fossil cards as much as I wanted to play the magnets. The magnets just seemed to work better for what the deck was trying to do. So maybe one day I'll make like a going second fossil fusion deck instead of the magnets, because the fossils still work well with the Adamancipators. I just think that the magnets work a little bit better. I will say, though, that using Skullgaios to do a ludicrous amount of damage in one turn is extremely satisfying. There is one other fossil card, though, that you might consider using, and that is Miracle Rupture, which just sends a level 4 lower rock monster from your deck to the graveyard, and if Fossil Fusion is in your graveyard, you draw a card. So the important thing here, of course, is that you can use this as like a foolish burial that you can run at 3 to just ditch stuff into your graveyard. So Revival Golem, really good. If it's sent to the graveyard, you can just special summon this, and then you have free material for something. Tackle Crusader, it does stuff when it's sent to the graveyard, like targeting a monster and changing it to face-down defense, or targeting a spell or trap and returning it to hand. So this is cool stuff that you can do with that. Sentry Soldier of Stone as well, it special summons itself from the graveyard, so that's another level 3 that you might want to use. But I found that I just never... like, they're good. Don't get me wrong, these are decent enough effects, you can use them if you want, but I found that the deck doesn't really need them, and just digging for more magnets was typically the better play to make. And to cap it all off, we have Attack the Moon! No, don't do it. Alrighty, so let's take a look at some gameplay now, or a sort of a gameplay demo, really, because so much of this deck relies on uncertainty, because you never really know exactly what you're going to get. There aren't any, like, cut-and-dry combos to speak of, but there are things that you can try to look for as you dig deeper and deeper down into your deck using your Adamancipators. So let's take a look at, well, first of all, this is the closest thing to a legitimate combo that this deck has, and it's something that does come up quite often, so it's a good play to have in the back of your mind. So, to get this going, what you want is one of the 2 level 4 magnets and magnet induction. So this works best if you have Delta. but unfortunately there is only one delta in the deck, so often it doesn't work this way and you have to start with Epsilon instead, but for the purposes of this video, we are going to assume that we have our delta. So we can normal summon delta and send another magnet to our graveyard. I like to use beta, because we're going to be special summoning this later, and beta is a search for other things. So beta can be sent to the graveyard, and now we can activate our magnet induction, which will allow us to special summon Epsilon from the deck. So Epsilon, when it comes into play, will send another magnet to the graveyard. I guess it doesn't really matter, Gamma is as good as any, but then because Epsilon's name is Gamma now, I will be able to special summon this beta that I just put there. So, if we had started with Epsilon, we still would have these two in the graveyard, but beta would not be special summoned. So this way we just have a little bit of extra stuff in play. Now, from here, we can use our delta and our epsilon to XYZ summon out Gallant Granite, who got caught on my glove. To XYZ summon out Gallant Granite. And now we can detach one of these to search our deck for any rock monster. And oh, before I forget, because beta was special summoned, we also get to add this alpha to our hand. So we've got all of the electromagnet warriors present and accounted for now. But anyway, Gallant Granite, yes, we have removed a card from its materials, and you can search for Nibiru if you want one of these in your hand for your opponent's turn. That's kind of a cool thing that you can do. But usually, you're searching for Adamancipator Researcher, because even if you don't have this beta in play, at the very least, we know that we have Gallant Granite, which is a rock, and therefore you can just special summon your Adamancipator Researcher and start digging and special summoning other things, and just going crazy from there. For example, this is a level 2 tuner and a level 3 non-tuner, so already we know that we can, in fact, play the Naturia Beast and make our opponent's life miserable. So here's another board state you might want to keep an eye out for. It involves one of your level 2 Adamancipators and a level 3 monster, one of your electromagnet warriors. So, say you are digging with this Adamancipator, and you come across the Adamancipator Crystal Dragite. Well, using the two of these, you can make your Coral Dragon, which is a tuner. But because you special summoned your Adamancipator Crystal Dragite off of an Adamancipator, you got to draw an additional card. And now we've got a level 6 and we've got a level 3. Coral Dragon, of course, is a tuner. We can then go even further and use the two of them to play our Ravenous Croco Dragon, which will draw one card off of its own effect and one card off of Coral Dragon's effect. So off of all of this, we have drawn a grand total of 3 additional cards, which is massive. That sort of thing doesn't happen every day. So, because there's only one of these crystals, again, this doesn't happen every day, but it is not super uncommon for you to go from the Coral Dragon into the Croco Dragon, and that is at least an extra 2 cards that you get to draw, which is not nothing, and it is probably going to put you in a rather advantageous position, so if you can do it, it is something that is worth looking into. And speaking of the Coral Dragon, it also goes rather well with our Cartorin, the hidden gem of the seafront, because if you've used this already, and you have some whatever earth rock in play, then you can just bring this right back from the graveyard and use the 2 of these to synchro right into your Adamancipator Risen Dragite. And then we know for a fact that we actually have 2 water monsters in our graveyard, so its effect to negate whatever the opponent is doing is very much online. So that is something that if you're going first and you happen to have our hidden gem here, that is something that you can try to do just to put up another barrier that your opponent will need to get over. And one final note about the electromagnet warriors: use them! Make sure you take full advantage of these cards. Don't just leave them in play if you can avoid it. If you have any of your tuners in play, make sure you use them so that you can synchro out other things. Or if you just have them sitting around, at the very least, use them to link summon out literally anything, right? Even if it's just Mrs. Radiant. Because our Berserkion the Electromagna Warrior doesn't need its Magnet Warriors to be in play. It can use them from the graveyard to special summon itself, so you don't really have any reason to leave them in play if you can just banish them all from the graveyard after you've already used them to special summon this thing, and then start destroying whatever your opponent might have. So make sure you aren't wasting resources, because that simply won't do. And there you have it. That will conclude my deck profile for my Adamancipator Magnet deck. Again, I would say this is one of the most fun decks that I have ever made, and the uncertainty of it all is really what makes it fun. I said this earlier, but the fact that you can whiff completely and get nothing just adds to the charm of what you are trying to do. This deck does not play the same way every time you play it. Depending on how many Adamancipators you get, which magnets you happen to dig up, you will be doing different things all the time, and the more you learn about what you can try to do and when, and how well you can recognize what you're sort of building toward, then the better you are going to do with this deck in general. Now, it's certainly not the strongest deck I have ever made, but it does do pretty well, actually. Again, it's sometimes as simple as playing a Naturia Beast and stopping your opponent from doing whatever. But it's also a lot of fun to get this Berserkion in play and start blowing up all of your own magnets to destroy your opponent's stuff and getting a whole bunch of attack power through at once, because these three Adamancipators really do fill the field with a lot of stuff. So link summoning and synchro summoning is super easy, provided they actually find what they're looking for as they dig through your deck. But yes, this will bring me to the end of today's video, and I do hope that you enjoyed it. And if you did, then please leave a like, a comment, subscribe, and I do hope that you'll join me again next time for whatever deck it might be that I am profiling next. I do have at least one more in mind, so stay tuned for that. Till then, ta-ta. Oh, good heavens, look! We got a collector's rare. Excuse me a moment. Oh, hello! I like it, I like it, I do. I was worried for a second that this box was going to be suboptimal. Oh, goodness, that is a pull right there. Let's find out. Oh, boy.